We all know that lenses for cameras can be quite expensive and there's so many options out there. Having said that, it leads into many questions as well, like, should I go with a prime lens or a zoom lens? Should I choose the lower aperture, wide angle lens or telephoto lens? A lens that won't put me in a box. Is there a lens that can do it all? And most importantly, how much is all this going to cost me? While there's nothing close to a perfect lens that can tackle everything in my opinion, you can get pretty darn close with the EF 16 to 35 millimeter lens with an aperture of 2.8. This lens has made me quite a bit of money, and although it has some pros and cons to it, it has definitely outperformed itself by far. I have used this lens for real estate, both commercial and residential, automotive photography, videography, and portraits, but to top it off, YouTube vlogging as well. Alright, so what makes this lens so great? Honestly, it's the 2.8 aperture. As you may know, the lower the aperture, the more background separation you can get with an image that you are shooting. 2.8 is pretty low, while many prime lenses can go even lower than that. Having said, a 2.8 aperture with a zoom lens that has a little more fluctuation in what you can do with it definitely goes a long way. Another thing that it's good for is to capture that perfect cinematic video footage that you're trying to get of whatever you're filming as well. While most people can argue that the zoom range can be way better, they're actually right. But remember, in the zoom itself, it has the 35 millimeter range, which there's a ton of photographers for portrait and headshot photography that use the 35 millimeter prime lenses. Now they go down to a 1.4 or even a 1.2 aperture, but this one with a 2.8 aperture is definitely nothing to laugh at and provides a significant amount of quality for capturing that very sharp image of whatever you're capturing, whether it be a person, whether it be a landscape object, or even an automotive type object. Not to mention that you can always attach the handy dandy ND filter to the lens as well, so that way you can shoot any time of the day when it's bright and shiny. Let's talk about the 16 millimeter zoom range. It's a very wide angle range. Now this only applies to if you're using it on a full frame camera, which that's a video for another time. But the 16 millimeter angle is absolutely phenomenal for real estate photography, whether you're talking about commercial or residential. And with an aperture that goes all the way up to f22, guess what? It makes it clear as day for every object in the frame that you're trying to capture. And for real estate, you never want to really have that background separation. You always want to have the whole entire room crystal clear, or the whole entire image crystal clear, so that way you're capturing and you're showcasing it absolutely perfectly. Now, another thing that this applies for, not only just real estate, but you can capture that perfect company group photo as well with everyone in focus. Lastly, the price. Now, I say it doesn't set you back a lot, but you still have to dish down $1,600 for this lens to date. As mentioned before briefly, the RF lenses, they can go as expensive as $2,700. That definitely is cheaper, in my opinion, to get the EF lens mounted up to your mirrorless camera. So we have quickly gone over the pros. Let's get to the bad news, the cons. What does it not do so great? Because every lens, in my opinion, has the pros, and then they also come with some cons. This lens is definitely not for a niche photographer. And what I mean by that is if you're specifically honing in on automotive photography or portraits or headshots, I don't think that you should get this lens, because you should definitely go with a prime lens that kind of puts you in that box and make you perfect that niche, especially if you're not caring about any video footage and you're solely taking photos. I would recommend a prime lens. The other thing that kind of sets me back a little bit on having to choose the EF lens is the fact that you have to buy an adapter to fit onto a Canon mirrorless camera. So I shoot with the Canon EOS R, and in order for this lens to fit properly, I have to buy an adapter that changes it from an RF lens to fit the EF and the EFS lenses, and that sets you back anywhere from $70 to $100 or so. But there is kind of a caveat to that. So if you are buying that adapter, now you can purchase all EF lenses and not worry about those crazy expensive RF lenses prices. Now, is there quality difference? Yes, there's always going to be quality difference between the new Canon RF lenses and the older EF lenses, but they're not completely outdated, trust me. They're worth the money still. The other thing that I have not been completely happy with is when I use it for video, the autofocus on the lens seems to be a little bit slow. And with it being delayed, it really kind of ruins the image. Now, yeah, you might say, why don't you just switch it over to manual mode? Well, that's fine and everything, but when I'm vlogging or when there's a lot of variables going on in frame and I don't necessarily want to use that manual focus, it can be kind of frustrating with that autofocus being so incredibly delayed. And lastly, it is pretty heavy. Now with the Canon EOS R, like I mentioned, I film with, and this lens, it is pretty heavy. Now, if you're doing it for videography and you hook it up to a gimbal, let's say, the CG or the center gravity is very difficult to kind of balance out properly, so that way those motors on that gimbal is not overworking. But more importantly for vlogging, be prepared to get tired. Your arms are gonna get tired because it's gonna be a heavy setup. Also, be prepared to hold the camera by the lens because it's that awkward. But of course, if you're only using it for a tripod scenario, all that doesn't matter. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you liked the video, please smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for a lot more content coming out just like this. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below and I will answer to the best of my ability. We'll catch you next time. Peace.